Welcome to the San Gorgonio Chapter Trail Talk series. My name is John St. Clair, and I'm your Zoom host and one of the committee members that helps organize these Trail Talk presentations. And Trail Talk is on the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. And this meeting is being recorded. I sent out a reminder message today to everyone who had registered online, and I included in it the link to the San Gorgonio Chapter YouTube channel. So if for any reason, if you're not able to watch this whole thing, you can, it'll be up by tomorrow noon. And you can go to just click on that link that was in the reminder message I sent to you. And you'll be able to look at this Trail Talk presentation plus the Trail Talk presentations for the last year and a half. They're all recorded and on the YouTube channel. So couple things about rules for this presentation. We want everybody to be muted except for the speaker. And if you have questions, use the chat section to write them down so you don't forget them. And the chat section can be opened up by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Looks like a little talking bubble. And I see a lot of people already writing in the chat section. So that's where you put your questions. And after the presentation's all over, you're welcome to unmute yourself and give comments or ask other questions at the end of the presentation. I want to put in a little plug for San Gorgonio Chapter Outings program, because we are back out on the trail after 2 years of being shut down because of the pandemic. We are doing outings, and there's a number of choices for people. I'll put a special plug in for myself. I'm hiking every Wednesday morning early, and I've been doing the 7 peaks of the Cucamonga Wilderness, and it's a patch program. And next Wednesday, I finish the 7th peak. In July, I'll start all over again and do all 7 peaks again. And probably in the fall, I may do some of them a third time. And there's no time limit on earning the patch. We had one person already get their patch this year who did 6 of the 7 hikes in 2019 before COVID shut us down. And then he finished his last one 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to introduce the speaker, I guess. Another thing I want to mention is next month's Trail Talk, I'm going to be presenting on hikes in Banff National Park in Canada. And I've got some great photos from that beautiful national park in Canada. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Mary Ann Ruiz, who of course is our chapter chair and very active in Sierra Club. And tonight she's going to be talking about river rafting. And so I'm going to remove my spotlight and spotlight Mary Ann.
All right, well, thank you, John. And you won't be looking at my face very long. I'm going to share my screen and get right into this presentation. So. Let's see, which one are we sharing here? This one. Screen share. All right, let me get it on a wait a second. 1 second here. I'm messing myself up. I'll try this again. All right, can everybody see the presentation here?
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry for that little glitch there. But before I start, Sierra Club, we'd like to acknowledge the lands that we are on and the traditional owners of this country and their continuing connection to the land, waters, and community. Yeah, we pay respect to their elders, past and present, and to the pivotal role that Indigenous people continue to play in caring for our land, waters, and wildlife. The San Gorgonio chapter is on the land of the following Indigenous people: Tongva, Chumash, Keys, and Tatiabam, and San Bernardino, Uhaviatum, also known as the Serrano. So we'd just like to make sure we respect that in all of our presentations. So this was going to be our welcome slide while we were waiting, and we'll just move on to the next one. Just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. Just a general outline of the thing. I have a disclaimer here. I am absolutely not an expert on river rafting. I'm not an experienced river person. I've been on these 2 trips that we'll talk about tonight, but I can take you along on the experiences I've had and let you know what it's like. The trips that I've taken are with National Outings. Sierra Club's National Outings program offers hundreds of trips to the various activities and locations. You can see here on this, this is the river trip I took, the San Juan River in Utah. Another option on a trip I took was a small boat day on an Alaska trip that was camping, hiking, kayaking, and staying in hostels. So there's all kinds of trips that you can find on the Sierra Club National Trips page. There's all levels of adventure, various cost levels, travel, and experience levels that might be needed. This slide here is a screenshot of the first page that comes up when you search for Sierra Club National Trips. And you can see that it's showing 250 current trips to select from. You can select them by activity on the left side. You can select them by destination. And there's everything here from a 7-day backpacking basics trip that's pretty low cost at $595 here in California, all the way up to a very expensive African safari for 10 days at $7,695 plus airfare. So Sierra Club trips are, they are competitively priced with other, other kind of touring companies. But you have the added advantage of having really excellent volunteer leaders. All the leaders are volunteers. They're passionate about the trips that they plan, the places they go. Some of the cost goes to further the work that Sierra Club does to explore, enjoy, and protect our planet. Tonight, we're going to see 2 areas of river trips, and that's the main Salmon River in Idaho and the San Juan River in Utah. Both trips were around $1,625 for 6 nights and 7 days on the river, and all your food and the equipment that you need. So it's very competitive with if you did it with a private touring company. So, let's look at why I would have considered a multi-day raft trip down the river of no return with 27 strangers somewhere into the largest wilderness in the lower 48 states. Here's some of the reasons. You experience, remote scenery that is only accessible by river travel. You can choose your activity level. You can sit on the oar raft, which is basically what I did the whole trip. You can you can be on a paddle raft, which is a little more active, a smaller raft that doesn't have gear on it, and you paddle with other people. Or you can also choose to have an individual, a 1 or 2 person kayak and kayak the river yourself if you have that experience. The dark night skies in some of these areas are some of the darkest you're going to see because they are so remote. Your travel is with a focus on appreciating public lands and learning about some conservation issues there. The guides make excellent food. They make all your food 6 o'clock in the morning. They're up with coffee ready and make a full breakfast. They make lunch on the side of the river and nice dinners. It's kind of a pride themselves on the food they do. And you can experience, really exciting rapids, calm waters, and make some new friends. So it's a fun kind of trip to take. So there's various things that you want to consider about choosing a raft trip. In the West, water level is a big consideration. For example, the San Juan River was flowing really nicely at 2,000 cubic feet per second, which is the way they measure river flow. On the day we put into the river, on the last day when we were trying to get off the river, it was down to 675 cubic feet per second, and we had a very long day with our guides having to navigate sandbars. Several times we had to get out and walk, pull the boats, and the wind was blowing against us. So it took us about 3 hours longer than planned. So water level is important. And then you want to consider, what do you like? Are you interested in seeing mountainous terrain, unique scenery, red rock, Southwest type of scenery? And then also, do the travel logistics work for you? The trips always explain all the logistics of getting there, and some of them are a little bit more complicated because it is remote. Then you might want to consider the group size. Are you good with a large group of 25 people for 6 nights that you don't know, or prefer to spend that time with a smaller group? And then the temperature. It can be very cold, it can be very hot. You want to be prepared for the weather and know what you're getting into when you choose a trip. Then the last thing you might want to do is to check the bios of the leaders on the website. Sierra Club website for trips has a biography, a short one. It's a short bio, but you can learn a little bit about the trip leader and maybe make a decision that way. And also check the outfitter that they use for reviews to see if there's anything there that helps you with choosing a trip. So before the trip, all your gear and clothing needs will be communicated by your trip leader. They are really good at letting you know what to bring, what you need, and what will be supplied by the outfitter. You'll have a packing list for your own gear. The leaders can be very helpful with planning travel. They can give you all the different options. They'll connect people that might be coming from the same region to see if folks want to plan things together. And then you'll meet the day before the trip, get all your dry bags so that you can pack them up that night and be ready to go in the morning. This is a scene in Salmon, Idaho of our group. And you can see at the other side of the hotel, there's another group all packed up, ready for the vans to take us to the put in on the river. The day of the trip, the guides are there waiting when we get there with all the gear that's needed except for our own bags. They take those, add them to the rafts that are all packed up. You can see here there's the oar rafts. These big long oars are on the oar rafts. Those are the ones the guides paddle. They have all kinds of equipment on them. They're all packed up with lots of gear that you can't even see below the edge of the raft. And this little raft here is I believe that's a paddle raft that folks can help paddle for fun. And there's other trips setting out. You can see down here in the background, there's another group of people packed up, ready to go. And the camps along the river are really heavily used, and a lot of times they can't be reserved. So the guides have to plan ahead and try to get the site that they want. And planning ahead to get there on time and find the available sites are part of the work they do. So I thought I'd just stop here real quick and see if there's any questions yet. Anybody has?
I don't see any in the chat section.
Okay. Well, there'll probably be some come up as we go along.
I have a question.
Okay, John has a question.
So we're talking about, which trip are you talking about first?
Well, I'm kind of mixing them both up as far as the logistics part and this beginning part, but right now we're on the Salmon River trip.
Okay, because you talked about the price range. What did you pay for this kind of?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I meant to say that. Yes, both trips were about $1,625.
Okay.
They're similar trips in time and distance on the river. And so they were very similar costs. That doesn't include getting there. You got to get there on your own.
Right.
Okay. So, we set off on the river that day. This is an example of a camp on the river. This was kind of a fun one because the river was slow. The camp was just right up the hill from a nice big beach. You can see all of our tents laid out there. And
so there, a question came in.
okay.
Why does the river fluctuate in the flow?
Well, there's different reasons. That large change in the river that we were on this last trip and on the San Juan, there are dams upstream. And in that particular river, they're during the springtime, they have releases from the dam to try to replicate the former free river when there were springtime occasional floods. So they might release a bunch of water and then stop the release to replicate springtime flooding. So that would be one reason the river would change so quickly in those 7 days. Okay. Typically, they don't change that quickly in one trip, but just the time of year that you're on the river can make a difference in the flow of the river in general. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so this is a camp. Our tents are all spread out up here. Down here along the river is the kitchen is set up. There's chairs set up. I think you can see some folks sitting in chairs just there on the beach. And then there's a bunch of us out there swimming. And there's a little structure over here that we'll talk about later, but just keep that in mind for later in the presentation. This is a close-up of us swimming down on the river. You'll notice here that we are just sitting in chairs and floating in the river with, we don't have any protective gear or anything. And that is because this is a very slow spot on the river and the sandbar is protecting us from the current. If you choose to be in the current swimming at all, you have to wear your personal flotation devices. You can see the swimmers on the Salmon River decided to swim along beside the raft for a while, but she has her PFD on, personal flotation device. So there'll be days on the river or times maybe within the same day when the river is just almost perfectly calm. You can see this was a little hazy. Darn, I keep hitting the wrong button. A little hazy this day. This was last summer when there were a number of fires. There was a fire in this area, and this was one of the more clear days towards the beginning of the trip. And one of the days we passed by fire that was on the hillside. It had burned, and there were smoldering logs and burned down trees right down to the edge of the river. So that was not a real fun thing. Just maybe another consideration is to think about fire in the area that you want to go.
So what month was this trip?
This was late July, early August. So the river was pretty serene. There was still real good flow in this river, but it wasn't super high. So you have calm periods, and then you can have what some people go on these trips for is the excitement of running rapids. You can see up in the background here, there's some kayaks. So folks ran these rapids in individual kayaks and get pretty excited about that and making it through. On this particular trip, I think we had several times when the kayakers got flipped out of their boats, out of their kayaks into the water. But none of the paddle or boats ever flipped. There was never any concern about me feeling like I was going to fall in the water. You just hold on. As you go along the river during the day, there's always a lunch stop. This is a scene where we had, I don't believe this was a lunch stop, but we also stopped occasionally for, we walked up to a local point of interest along the river. There was some, I don't recall exactly, there was a historical thing up there that we walked up to see, and that's just to look at our loaded up rafts from above.
Now the paddle boats look like they're really packed full of stuff. Where do you sit?
Well, you'll see in this next one, we're sitting right on these front tubes and get wet occasionally when there's a big rapid like that. But most of for me, not wanting to paddle or be in a kayak, I mostly said usually they can sit, 2 or 3 people in the front here, and there's also room in the back for a couple people. So if you could either sit in the front or the back, just right on the tubes of the raft. Here's another scene of the San Juan River. It was a real different experience from the Salmon River in Idaho. The days were warm, and we had one very, very hot day. The water was cold and very silty. As you notice, the Salmon River was pretty green. I mean, normal water green color, not murky at all. But the San Juan River is very silty and brown. The day before that we got on the river, we visited the Bears Ears Information Center in Bluff, Utah, for a talk about the National Monument and some conservation issues there. We heard about efforts, to be sure that archaeological resources are visited respectfully, such as not entering the rooms in the cliff dwellings, and viewing the sites from a distance, not touching petroglyphs and art on the rocks, and then leaving any artifacts that are found where we found it. We did. Oh, here, we'll move on. This is a map of the Bears Ears National Monument in Utah. And the San Juan River runs right, if you look at the very bottom of the map here. Are you able to see my cursor when I put it up here? Okay, yes. So we put in right here at Sand Island. Bluff is a town that we all had to get to. We put in at Sand Island. There's a petroglyph site right there, a big panel that you could walk up to. And then we came along down here and camped at a camp right here where we were able to, and that was, the reason for that was so that we could go up to see River House, which is on the next slide. I'll go through the map a little bit more and then we'll go to River House. But we continued through, you can see a very curvy river, through the Goosenecks portion of the river, which is really curvy. The river is mostly out of the National Monument, goes through it right at the edge here. And then we ended up taking out right about up here at this edge of the river. And then we had a almost 2-hour ride on mostly dirt roads to get back. Well, partially dirt roads to get back to our starting place over here in Bluff.
So how many days were you on the river?
7, 6 nights, 7 days.
Ah.
So the reason, yes.
Has Bears Ears National Monument been restored to its original size?
Yes, President Biden restored it, as far as I know, back to the very large size that was initially set by President Obama. It's been restored. So we stopped at this historic site. River House is an ancestral Puebloan structure. There's standing walls. There's a kiva structure, which was a ceremonial structure, and it's dated back to the 1200s. They say that it was also the walls and structure were dated back to the 1200s. The site itself was also inhabited briefly during the 900s, but they are pretty sure that most of the structure was from the 1200s. And above the structures here are some rock designs, and there's more that I'll show you in the next couple pictures. So this picture on the left here shows some more stonework above and below here, and some of that was, you don't go into these rooms, so I'm not sure exactly if that was places that were inhabited. Some of these are storage rooms for grain. And then on the right, you can see some petroglyphs that were just above the structures that we saw before. There's more that we're going to see. And if you take a look at this slide, this is just to give you some idea of scale of these petroglyphs in the rock. The petroglyphs are up in here. So take note of the size of this is probably a little 2 or 3 foot high bush. And then you can see this place where the rocks are cracked. You're going to see in the next slide the rock art that's above that, and kind of gives you a sense of scale. That these are some pretty big figures. They're very interesting figures, a whole bunch of them. And they're shaped like kind of like a man or person. But they're very impressive to see this. Just close up and just be able to look at it. There's many, many sites like this in Bears Ears National Monument, and keeping them protected and not defaced or artifacts taken is a big job. There were a bunch of artifacts in an area nearby here that you could just walk over and pick up pottery shards and stuff, but then you put them back down and leave them there. So hopefully folks are respectful of that when they visit. But this site is only, there is a way to get to the trail from by car, but it's a long, like a 5 or 6 mile difficult 4-wheel drive road. And then you get to the trail and still have to walk a mile or so.
So we got a question about the river guides. Are they knowledgeable about the petroglyphs and the history and that?
The river guides are really helpful. They are typically taught a lot about or learn a lot about the area that they're taking you through. And we've had a couple of times where we, after the meal, we would sit down with the guide, the leader of the guides, and he would give us a talk about what we were going to see the next day. One day we went up a hike where we saw some fossils and were able to see really good fossils in the rocks. I don't think I have any pictures of those, but the guides are very, very informative. And there's one of them that was Davide. He was a lot of fun. It's just another scene along the river. There were side canyons that would come in along the side, and none of there was only one I think that had an actual creek in it this trip. And you can see how the water levels on this river here are down from what they might have been. So this one here was a bit of an oops. You can see that this boat is very well stuck. There's a tiny, relatively small rapid here, but the rocks were, I guess, deceived this particular guide. She went and tried to go between these two big rocks and got totally stuck. Here's the rest of us kind of watching. And if it works, I'm going to play a little video of getting them unstuck. Let's see how this works. All right. So we did get the boat loose, but it took a lot of work by a lot of people, as you can see. Whoops, hold on. I got to stop this other thing from playing. Why is this doing this? Hold on. Wait a minute. Okay.
Maybe close that.
Yes, I'm going to close this. Hold on a second. Oh, this is sort of fun. There. Okay, well, we got to listen to Kermit for a minute there. We didn't see any frogs on this river trip, but sorry. So we did eventually get off the river or get off those rocks. My guy, the guy that whose boat I was in, took us. He didn't try to go through the rocks. He went along this side channel, as most of them did, and got right through without any problem. So I think this guy thought that they were going to make it more exciting and made it interesting at least. So yeah, sometimes a river fools even the best of the guides. So now we're going to talk about some of the things that maybe are not quite so appealing, but if you to make sure that you enjoy your trip, you need to be flexible, kind of know what to expect, and have a bit of a sense of humor about the not so appealing parts of rafting. I learned after the first trip that I should not overpack. My dry bag was very, very heavy on the first trip. So you will be, moving bags and chairs and Paco pads, which are these things that you get to sleep on, up and down hills every day. You move them up the hill from the beach in a line, you get in a line and move them up the hill, and then same thing in the morning, move them back down the hill. And these can be pretty heavy. So we were read some pre-trip preparations by one of our guides, and the one about this was, to have your friends form a long line, pass the entire contents out of your home, out the front door and into the back door. That would give you practice for what we're doing every day, getting all these bags, chairs, tents up off the river. So that's one of the less fun things. Another one is that sand is going to be everywhere, pretty much on everything you do. We're sitting on sand with our dinner plates in our lap, drinks are on the ground in the sand. Every morning before packing up my tent, I'd get someone to help me pick it up, turn it upside down, and shake out the day's sand that had accumulated in my tent. And this was the pre-trip little tip to get ready, was to have a yard of sand delivered to your home, shake it everywhere, and just, go ahead as usual. So just something, like I said, you need to have a sense of humor, mostly a sense of flexibility, and understand ahead of time that it's not all just easy, but it's well worth it in my view. And then this is the last one, and we'll go back to talking about that little structure that I pointed out with an arrow in an earlier slide. There, modesty is overrated. There's not a lot of privacy on one of these trips. You're on boats with 25, this one was 25 people and 6 guides. And sometimes this was a nice big spread out campsite, but sometimes they're not nearly this big. Your tents are right next to each other. You've got wet and sandy clothes, and you're going to be changing clothes. You're going to be hanging out your wet underwear on the rocks, so you just got to get over being too shy about that. The trip was to, just practice changing while your neighbors watch every day. So that might not be a good idea. But the other not so appealing part of a river trip is that little gray tent. We're going to talk about the groover. Close campsite, or imagine the impact of 20 to 30 people on these campsites every single day during the rafting season. The rule about that is, about lessening impacts, is that, think about if everyone in these campsites were indiscriminately urinating wherever they wanted to. The rule here is that pee goes in the river. You can go down to the river and pee, or in camp, there's a designated groover location. And that is that little gray tent we saw earlier. On the trip I was just on, there was never a little tent. It was just set up in some willows with a river view. It was 2 things: a bucket with a toilet seat on it, where you could sit down and pee if you wanted to, rather than going down to the river. And then a big camp toilet And they asked you to be very careful about not getting toilet paper or poop in the pee bucket, because they empty that out every night or every morning before we leave in the river. And the camp toilet, they have to seal that up after every campsite, haul it back down to the rafts, and then at the end of the trip, they have to take it to a dump station and clean it out. So there is no leaving of any human impact on the campsites, because nobody would want to go camp there if that was happening. That is really all I have. I imagine there might be a few questions about some of this stuff. So are there any in the chat yet?
Well, we've kind of been answering them as we go.
Right. Well, if here, I'll stop sharing. And if folks want to, and you can unspotlight me.
Okay. I have one question. So the guides, are they the outfitters or are they the Sierra Club people, volunteers?
The guides are the outfitters. The Sierra Club leader organizes the trip. She works with the river companies that get permits. The river companies get permits to run the rivers. You have to have a permit. And for a large group, it's harder and harder to get permits, apparently, as an individual. Our leader, Lisa, has been doing river rafting for 40 years, at least. And she had her own raft company for a while, and it got harder and harder to get permits. And so she started leading with Sierra Club. And that makes it so that she can actually maybe enjoy the trip a little more. But she organizes everything, makes sure that Sierra Club has the permit, and Sierra Club approves the guides that we're using. And then they do all the setup and everything. So this particular trip, the one at San Juan River, was with a company called Oars. They did really well. The Salmon River trip was a company called Wet Planet Rafting. And while we were on the Salmon River last year, Lisa was on the phone with Oars getting this permit for the San Juan, and had it all set up by the time our trip was over.
So here's a question. How many rafters were actually Sierra Club members? Do you have to be a member to go on these things?
Yes, I believe you have to join. Yeah, you have to join to go on a trip.
On the national trips?
On the national trips, you have to join, and you have to sign waivers. You have to fill out, you have to sign a waiver, but you also answer a bunch of questions about your activity level, your suitability for a trip like this, and your health. Because you are out on a remote location, they don't want to have to, have helicopters come in or anything.
How was the quality of the food?
The food was excellent. I mean, we had salmon cooked with lemon and onions the first night, with all kinds of good side dishes. We had steak the last night. We had a number of different, I think we had like a spaghetti or pasta dinner one night. We had all kinds of really, really good food. And breakfast would typically be we had pancakes one day, and usually there was a breakfast, ham or bacon and eggs, or we had a like homemade egg McMuffin type breakfast one day. Really good food.
Were they able to accommodate vegetarians?
We had all sorts of different things on the trip. There's forms. When you fill out your forms, you give them any food restrictions you had. We had vegans, we had gluten-free people. So yeah, they'll accommodate your needs. I mean, you need to tell them that up front, and if they can't, they will let you know that. Let's see, when was this trip? Okay, so I think that when was this trip? I'm not sure if the one trip was in the Salmon River was in July, August, and the San Juan River was just here the end of May of this year. The river guide's knowledgeable about what is along the river. Yes, Yeah, I think we asked that. How many rafters were Sierra Club members? What was the highest rated rapids you went through on either trip? That's a good question. So yes, they do tell you the Salmon River had some class 3.5 rapids, which was the biggest ones. They said maybe class 4, but the river was not running really high to make any class 4 river rapids on the Salmon. And the San Juan was, I don't think there's anything more than a 2. And I did learn how they classify them. It's not just how rough the rapid is and how likely you are to get knocked out of the boat, but it's also the temperature of the water and how long you might be in the water if you are knocked out of the boat. So if you're on a raft and you get knocked out of the boat and you come right or pulled right back in, that's probably a lower number rapid than if you're out of the boat and you get bounced down the rapid till calm water and you're in the river for maybe 10 or 15 minutes before you can get back. And so there's issues with cold water potentially and that kind of thing. So there's the classification for rapids was an interesting thing to learn about.
New question.
They're mellow versions. Yes, I'm a lightweight too. These were very mellow. I never felt like I was going to fall out of a boat. I got wet quite a few times on the Salmon River trip because we went through some bigger rapids, but nothing scary. The participants do not have to help with meal prep. We do have our plate and our fork. Basically, that's what you get, the plate and a fork. And there's a series of buckets of hot water, hot soapy water, 2 of those, hot rinse water, and then a rinse with some chlorine in it to make sure everything's clean. So you just take them and go through all these buckets and then put them in a little place that they dry. And then I see one here about sleeping arrangements. That you get your own tent. You can do either. I've just let the outfitters supply a tent. They're bigger than the backpacking tent I have, and it just saved having to mess around with traveling with that equipment. So you just get the tent. Was not an extra charge. They did charge you extra if you wanted what they call the sleep kit, which was like a sleeping bag and a pillow and a sleeping bag liner, which I did this time because I just didn't want to mess with the extra gear. But you can bring your own stuff too if you want. If you have a tent you like and your own sleeping bag, that's fine. The Paco pads that were in that picture, those big blue pads, are provided as part of the deal also. And the dry bags are all provided. You don't have to have a dry bag of your own. Okay, let's see. I'm just curious if anybody here has been on a trip or is interested in doing river rafting. Because I'd taken a number of Sierra Club backpack trips and got to the point where that was getting to be a bit too much. And this is much easier than a backpack trip, I tell you. It's a lot easier. You just float along and let them do all the work. So never overnight, but day trips, yeah. There are companies that do the day trips that are, typically those are more the exciting rapid kind of trips to experience running rapids on a river. This, you get some of that, but you're on the river all day. The last day on the San Juan, we put in at 9 and we're supposed to be at the takeout at 1 and we didn't get there till almost 4 because of the difficulty that day. Norm did the Kern River 2-day trip, very rough and very exciting. Yeah, I was not up for real exciting. Done a half-day trip, but interested in, yeah, the multi-day trip. I mean, it was quite an experience. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad I did it with Sierra Club because not only do you have, the Sierra Club behind you and the guy, the volunteer leader, but you kind of get a feel that you're going to be traveling with like-minded folks that are interested in nature conservation and caring for our wild spaces, understanding leave no trace, and we always left our campsites cleaner than we found them. So it's a very pleasant way to plan a trip, I thought. And you can compare the price of a Sierra Club trip with the outfitter. Just look on their website and see. And the ones I looked at were pretty close. The trips are already out there. In fact, there's some all the way, into next year, raft trips, and they fill up quickly. So if you see something you're interested in, sign up for it when there's space, or you can get on a wait list. If there's no other questions, I want to thank everybody for your interest, and hope you'll consider taking a Sierra Club National trip sometime, whether it's rafting or just travel, lodge trip, hut trip, backpack, any of those kind of trips. So thank you. And be sure to join us next month for John's program on Banff, which should be really interesting.
I'm going to stop the recording now.